All right. Welcome to this week's Taylor's College Roundtable. And as always, 2 weeks now.
Yep, two.
Here we are. So, we just talked about me eating donuts with how dirty my hands are.
Yeah, that was gross. And then you started licking your fingers.
So my wife had a flat tire. And
another flat tire?
It's the same one.
I
had to take it to the shop.
Okay.
Finally take it to the shop and get it fixed. So I picked it up. I was like, gosh, my hands are so dirty. Drove all the way back here. Went upstairs, talked to a few people, and there was donuts left over from this morning. I was like, ooh, donut. I'm down. Grabbed a donut, ate it like it was nothing. And then got another one and was talking to Courtney and her sister in the offices. And I realized like I'd eaten these donuts with how dirty my hands were. It's just like, it's not that bad. It's just brake
dust. You should show the camera.
It's just brake
not
dust.
That bad.
No, that's a working man right there.
It's just brake dust and like road grime. But
Dirt
how many
don't
dead
hurt.
animals are on?
Yeah.
We
Got a couple deer, maybe possum.
Okay, sorry, I digress. Anyway, so eating donuts with dirty hands builds immunity, and that's all you need to know. Fair enough.
Yep.
What's going on in y'all's world this week? Spring break's coming for you.
Yeah, I'm just living for spring break right now.
Living for spring break. I remember those days. Now I just live to sleep in until 7.
It's like me, like graduating, you think you have another break coming up because you're so used to school. And then when you graduate, it's like, man, where's that next break?
Probably
It's
even
not
worse
happening.
graduating in December because like your body's used to a spring semester because you're graduating in December next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your body's like thinking, oh, I should be going on a break too with everybody. But then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen for a long
No,
time.
it don't
And then
happen
all the
for a
breaks
long
you go on,
time.
you don't have to pay full price for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Adulting, fun.
All right. Well, hey, let's dive into today's podcast and video blog that we're doing on YouTube. And so last night we talked about guilt and being weighed down by guilt. And so I don't know. The Lord was kind of laying on my heart, like to talk about some like rest last week and feeling distant from the Lord the week before that. And I just last week as I was planning for what's next, I kind of have a couple sermons in advance, but lately I've kind of been twisting those. And this was something I was thinking of as I was talking with a couple students, like just the weight that guilt carries. You and I talked about this a little bit too, but before that, just like the weight that guilt carries. And then someone came up to me yesterday and was like, hey, like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, like what's going on? Like, why do you ask? They're like, well, you just like taught on being like distant from God and needing rest and like this week guilt. And like sometimes pastors are preaching on things that are going on in their life. And I was like, oh, no. Like, no, we're good. I promise. Like, yeah. That's exactly what the student was like referring to. And I was like, no, like for sure. There's times I felt distant from the Lord for sure. Like I always will take rest when I can. And like, yeah, I've been guilty for things and feel guilty, but like, no, like this isn't like an intervention. Like I need, it was kind of funny. So if you ever go into ministry, it's one of those things that people will, everybody hears. I thought of this the other day. Everybody hears with an agenda sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You hear with an agenda sometimes. I don't know. As I go to like pastors' conferences sometimes or different things, like in somebody's speech, you're like, wait, he totally could have driven that point home more, or I wouldn't have preached it that way. So we all listen with an agenda. So I try to do better at listening with open ears. But that student was genuinely concerned. They're like, yo, just checking in. I'm like, I appreciate you doing that, but like, no, I'm good. Like, promise. I'd take a sabbatical. It'd be nice, but, I'm good. Can't afford a sabbatical, but whatever.
Yeah.
You gotta fix tires, all that stuff. Anyway, guilt. Last night was something that we talked about pretty heavy. And I don't know, like and before we dive into anything else, like what's the initial thoughts? Like on I guess just some of the stuff from last night. That if I said anything or if there was any of the notes that you guys took at all in between laughing at me on stage.
We weren't laughing at you.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of saying like when people giggle in the crowd, it could be something like something really stupid or silly, whatever. Like I get self-conscious and I'm like, okay, is something wrong with me?
Yeah,
is my
like,
hair crazy?
Yeah.
Is my flying done? Are my shoes tied? Like what, what did I do? And go ahead and tell them what happened.
Well, last night when his
So
mic,
you were laughing at me. See?
It was the mic,
course
not
she
you.
was.
The mic went out and Trevor said something about it and me and Caitlin were like laughing about it because Caitlin was like, he's feeling self-conscious
Oh,
right now
yeah.
because we're already laughing. So it made us
Oh,
laugh
yeah.
even more.
And so, like, as I'm teaching, like, I was just, because it was, like, towards the beginning, like
Yeah.
that thing,
It
because
maybe 5 minutes.
if that, like, we were live streaming last night, so, like, I know our sound, like, cut out, like, so
Yeah,
I think I had to delete the live stream or something from last night, so
it happens.
it's because of stupid little blue tabs. I didn't take them off and charge
yeah.
them. So anyway, I'm failing this week, guys. I'm feeling guilty. I need some intervention.
Feeling weighed down.
Oh man! All right. So initial thoughts on guilt, or from anything last night that we kind of talked about.
I thought that Spurgeon quote you said that really resonated with me. I posted on my Instagram.
You're a great sinner, but he's a greater savior.
Yeah, I mean, because you think about it, there's no sin like God can't forgive. I think a lot of times, like, man, I really messed up in this aspect of my life, but it's like what you said. You said something about like, if I don't do this for 3 weeks or a month, like I'm kind of in good standing with God. When you're like.
Oh yeah. It's
like,
that whole idea of guilt, false guilt. Like, I've asked for forgiveness, but now I need to prove to you, God, that I am forgiven. Like, I've got to forgive myself by saying I haven't done this for 3 weeks. Like, so therefore I'm good. And then when you slip up, it makes the frustration of failing and the guilt that much heavier. I think a lot of times too.
Yeah.
But see, that's one of those things. I don't know if I drove this point home last night. Like, that's one of those things. Like, that's us trying to fix guilt on our terms, though, and not accepting Christ's, forgiveness. And this, if I can be honest, I have a hard time with God's forgiving. Like, even like what I was preaching last night, like, was definitely preaching to myself too. Like, if the Lord has forgiven me, then rest in that forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I don't know about you, but like, that wasn't taught to me a whole lot growing up. Like what I said at the end. Let's go to my notes. Like, it was identify sin, seek forgiveness, and then view guilt as God sees it. Like, if it's been dealt with, it's forgiven, and so, like, don't hold on to that. Now, I did make sure to make the point, like, hey, sin has consequences. So you may not be guilty anymore, but you still have to deal with some of the consequences that are going to go on, with that, whatever that may be. So I think still just having that is, I don't know, it's kind of major to know that in a way, but.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times, like, we want to be in control, and so we just, like, we forget about, like, how powerful God is, and that, like, he's so much greater than we ever are. So, like, the Spurgeon quote, like, he's a greater savior than we are a sinner. I think a lot of times, like, we sin and we feel guilty about it, but we feel like, oh, it's just, like, too much for him to forgive, and, like, I keep failing, and we forget that, like, it's by God's power that we are forgiven and that we can live guiltless and be free from that sin. Like, a lot of times it's just like you want to do it in your own power, but it's not. And so that's why we feel that weight of guilt, because we're trying to take care of it on our own. But it's nothing by, like, what we can do.
And I think too, not just taking care of it, but we try to maintain guilt in some regard. Like, we try to keep it at bay, and like just enough to where it's not dealing with us personally, but it still affects us, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
It affects relationships. I mean, it can affect every aspect of your life. Like, you let it fester and it just tears you down, really. And I think it can lead to bitterness and all sorts of craziness.
Well, and I think guilt too is something that just drives a bigger and bigger wedge in between you and the Lord too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's why, like, when we're going through in those notes I put in there, like, seek the Lord, rest in His promise, make healthy habits, discern what is true. Like, I think after identifying sin, even and like at the beginning I said, no big sin or small sin, whatever that looks like. They there's no contrast. Like, both bring guilt in some form. And so, like, I think on the other side of guilt, like, looking into the fact of, like, hey, if I want to, like, remedy this in the appropriate way and in the right way, what's some action steps? Because, like, I don't know, growing up, like, I heard a lot of really good sermons, but, like, how do I apply this to my life? Like, I hear it and this is good. Like, yeah, we should not be guilty. We should identify with Christ. He's forgiven our guilt. But how do I get past that guilt? How do I rest? How do I do these things? How do I remedy the feeling of feeling distant from the Lord? How do I, whatever it may be? Context is key for a lot of scripture, but I think too, having these, like, these are real life applications here. And I think too, adding to that, exegesis and eisegesis. Exegesis is pulling out of the text, right? All right, man, this is great. Eisegesis is putting my opinion into the text, essentially, like, not doing that. Like, God, what does your word say about application for this? And so, like, that's what I've been trying to do like my whole time here at Taylor's College, but like last night specifically, I was like, man, how do you really get through guilt? You know, like when it's really heavy, like you've been struggling with this, and like there's a student I've been talking with and just kind of mentoring, and he's just struggling with specific sin. And he's like, man, I want to get rid of it, and like I asked the Lord for forgiveness, and like I feel like I do well, and I do well, and then like all of a sudden I slip up, and then boom, I just feel this weight of guilt. And I said, well, I think part of that is one, you're trying to do this on your own power too. You're giving to the Lord, but you're going on your own power. And how are you seeking to remedy the situation by catching God in a promise, like I said last night? You know, so that conviction, spirit of conviction, when you do sin, when you do mess up, definitely there should be that internal compass of like, man, this is not right. Like I said last night, got to get it right. You know, I need to get this back on track. Seeking the Lord, resting in His promise, making healthy habits or cultivating. I used 3 different words for that last night. What I use make, cultivate, and develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, healthy habits, and then discern what is true. But yeah, thoughts on that?
I think we talked about it last week a little bit, but community, like I think confession is a beautiful thing. Like, hey, you know, us, you know, especially as guys, we talk about like areas we messed up in or just stuff we're going through, and especially in this day and age, it's like it's not done a lot. So just saying like, hey, like I need to do better in this aspect. It's just very freeing. Obviously, talk about it with other believers because internally you just keep it in. Like it's just going to wear you down.
Are you a question for both of you?
Okay.
Are you someone who just internalizes everything until you finally burst, or are you like something happens and then you give it right back or whatever it may be? Now today you've been kind of spicy today, so you've been kind of like until you give it right back. So I'm kidding. I'm not kidding.
You're gonna make them all think I'm crazy.
Yeah. Well, no, you're not crazy. You're just a little crazy. It's okay. We're all a little crazy. You're not crazy. You're one of the more sane ones in our college ministry. Hunter, on the other hand, he's just a quiet crazy. So
yeah, I have a secret life. Yeah, that's right. Surprise.
Oh gosh. So yeah. Do you internalize a lot of stuff? Do you bottle it up?
I definitely internalize. I don't like confrontation. I'll just keep it in until it bothers me enough to deal with it. But like also, I do wear my emotions on my sleeve, so you can just tell when I'm off.
So like, don't come near you or identify it.
Well, if you can ask me about it, but like I probably won't bring it up to you for a while. I can get over it.
You won't seek it out. If somebody comes to you with it, you'll talk about it.
I will seek it out eventually, but like I can usually get over it, like on my own. If it keeps happening after a while, I'll have to deal with it because then it just bothers me. But I try to just like forgive and forget until it's like, okay, well, if it keeps happening, you eventually have to deal with it.
I think I'm a little bit that way. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit that way. What about you?
I feel like, I internalize things. I feel like I'm getting better though, because before I used to not talk about stuff at all. Like I just bottled it up. Yeah, and like it would just burst, right, and it would just not be good. So especially me, you want to pursue ministry. It's like, hey, how do I control my emotions and not let my emotions control me? Because man, I mean, like if you let your emotions control you, you're going to be all over the place. In the ministry, you gotta have it together. Especially, I mean, it's just your shepherd and the people.
Well, so. And two, like emotions are a terrible compass. They're good indicators, but like being led by your emotions is not very healthy at all. And so, like guilt is one of those state of beings. Like we are guilty, before the Lord, as we talked about some passages last night. But also too, like even the feeling of false guilt. Once you're forgiven, that feeling of I have to make this right with God. Still, that's that false guilt. Like that's not real. It's perceived as real, but it's not. So like I had a really kind of fun time studying this and looking into this a little bit more. And there's so much more like I could go into. Not I could, but like we could go into study wise for that. But it's just interesting to look and see how like I feel like sin has a huge grip on every person, right? And in society, not just one generation. But it's funny how, in my opinion, like guilt just goes under the radar. Right? It goes under the radar about the radar of just like what's going on in your life. Because if you're dealing with sin, but you still feel guilty, you still feel shame, still for this. I think the consequence thing obviously is still there, but just never identifying, that hey, guilt could be a cause of prolonged sin, really, because you're not fully trusting the Lord to forgive you. Did that make sense last night when I was saying that? Because I saw some confused looks in the room, or maybe it's just like maybe this was new to them, like hearing it that way. I don't know.
I mean, it resonated with me because you kind of touched on it. Like I grew up, like in my elementary school age, I grew up in a very legalistic church. So it was kind of like, you had to always do these rules, and it's like you thought God was going to strike you down, like if you messed up. And so when you're like, forgiveness is free. I was like, yeah, it really is, because you shouldn't. I mean, yeah, you mess up, you learn from it, you move on, but you're not bound by it.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about grace, right? And you always say this quote, and I write it down a lot. Love what he loves and hate what he hates. And then try to apply that in my life, because it's just so true, so true.
And that ultimately comes based out of Colossians chapter 3. Everything where it's pulling us out of, fleeing these things, put to death these things, put to life, like put on these things. So loving what the Lord loves and hating what he hates. Interesting in that too,
I think a big part also in like feeling guilty and asking for forgiveness is like giving it over to God and asking for him to help you change. I think a lot of times people feel guilty about something after they've asked for forgiveness because they're also scared that they're going to fall back into that sin. But it's like recognizing that God has the power to help you overcome that sin and that you don't have to keep falling back into it. I think a lot of times people are just worried. Like they feel like something's going to set them off again. And so they just feel like the guiltiness of like the sin happening again too.
So their mind is already knowing I'm going to mess up again. So
yeah,
why even try almost?
right.
Interesting. What about guiltlessness? Like that's something you and I talked about a little bit with that. Like how do you see? I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious. Do you see people around you or people that either campus, at work, whatever, who just like don't have that guilt? And I attribute that to either one, they're not saved,
right? Yeah.
Or two, they've been in sin long enough, in a long enough. I can't get my words together. They've been in sin for an extended amount of time where it's hardened their heart.
Right. They're used to it. Yeah.
So therefore, they're no longer feeling guilt, and they're guilty, I think. But like, maybe they're feeling guilt. Maybe that's what you were saying too the other day, but they're not acknowledging it. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Right. I mean, it could be whether they're feeling guilt and not acknowledging it, or they're just dampening their conscience and they're not like even admitting to themselves that they feel the guilt. I mean, I feel like it happens a lot. I feel like it happens like commonly with people trying to fit in and just being like everyone else. And so then you start gossiping with other people. You start cheating on tests because like that's what other people are doing. So if you see other people do it, you're like, okay, it's not that bad. And then you just keep doing it. And then it's like eventually people stop feeling bad about it because they just do it all the time.
Or you see it as an easy out this one time. Like I can just get by this one time.
Right.
And then it becomes habitual.
Right. And if like you're not getting caught, people are like, is it really that bad? If I'm not getting caught, like it's not harming anyone else.
But if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if nobody hears it?
Yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? They're not there.
I mean, it still fell.
Is water wet?
This is
a
deep.
fire hot, like all these things. Something I said last night, kind of like not really an equation, but how guilt kind of breeds defeat and hope breeds freedom.
Would
you agree with that?
That was very good. Yeah, I mean,
don't toot my horn. Like, don't.
No, I thought it was great.
I mean, okay, if it's great, then tweet it. Let's see it.
Hey, no, I don't have to.
I don't either. Does that make sense though? Like when I said, because I was at the end as I was kind of jotting through notes, I was like, man, that is just something that I think of how when you're guilty, like you just, I don't know, personally, I feel defeated. I just feel like the world's crashing. Like when, like, let's just say let's say I'm going to get caught by every red light. Like that's just going to happen today. But like if I did something, I sinned in a way where I was feeling guilty and then I caught every red light, I just feel like defeated with everything just builds on that, What were you going to say a second ago?
I remember you were talking about like it doesn't matter if it's a small sin or a big sin, like you still feel guilt from it. I'm like, that's very good. I think a lot of times people think, oh, the sin has to be like so huge for me to feel anything. I'm like, no, like even small stuff, like maybe you treated a coworker or said something, and ultimately that's conviction, right? So I mean, obviously you want to feel the conviction, but yeah, for me it doesn't matter if it's a small sin or a big sin. It's still an issue, and so that's my take.
Yeah. Thoughts on that?
I agree. I think
You don't have to agree with it. If you disagree,
Yeah,
with
you
it,
disagree.
no.
I want to hear the disagreement.
Yeah.
No, I don't have a disagreement on that. I think it's like the metaphor, like hit me while I'm down. Like the guilt breeds defeat, hope breeds freedom. Is that what it was?
Hope breeds freedom.
It was something along those lines. But I mean, yeah, if you have that guilty mentality, you're definitely like the defeated. And I mean, Christ offers that hope to us. So it's like, why wouldn't we want to take it and live free? It's almost like sometimes we like to sulk in the guiltiness and like have that defeated like pity mentality.
Do you know people who are just like always like pity me parties?
Oh
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like, I'm not throwing shade, but man, those people, I'm gonna pray for you. You know, God just are you one of those people?
No.
Okay, I just have to ask. Are you one of those people?
I mean, I won't lie. I feel like there was times where I was, and as like I've matured, it's like, okay, this is stupid. Like,
Was it for attention?
oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like, but now I'm
they
like,
want you to feel your story.
yeah,
they want you to feel.
it's like this is just stupid. Like, hey, that's just part of maturing as a man. You know, it's just like, okay, let's go to work. Let's do this. What I have to do, and you know, let everything be a teaching moment.
Yeah.
Not everything bad that happens is, you know, God's shaping you for something greater. That's just my approach on that now. Before it's like, why is this happening, God? And I'm questioning God. I'm like, you know, God's God. God's going to do what He wants to do, and ultimately that's, you know, to help us and, you know, to ultimately carry out His gospel. So.
You know how my parents like got me to like quit being like dramatic about things? They'd be like, whenever I get in trouble, they'd be like, if I recorded you right now and you watched yourself, like how would you feel?
Yeah.
Not just totally, you're just like, I'm done. Like no
Did
more.
they
I
ever
give up.
record you?
No, they
that
didn't.
Would be awesome to finally show you. I need to do that with Emmy or with Zeke or something like.
Because that's embarrassing.
You're acting like.
You're like, that's what I look like. I don't want to look like that. That's terrible.
Oh man, yeah, I need to keep that in the back of my mind. That's a good one. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guilt breeds defeat. Hope, and in my opinion, hope breeds freedom. And so I think one thing I mentioned last night, to put this in context, is how if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, even if you're not, the devil's going to do everything he can to destroy God's created beings. Look at the earth, look at animals, we have death, we have sin, you know, us. Like there's things that are just pulling at us every day. I'm not trying to over spiritualize our lives or anything like that, but the devil wants to just rip us apart any way he can. And so like as we are believers and we're trying to be deeper in our faith and be intentional with our life, one of those things, I think that's what I was going back to earlier, like guilt is something that just kind of flies under the radar of where we want to, like you said, sulk in it or bask in it, you know, whatever that looks like for you, just kind of hanging on to your guilt, which ultimately I think breeds the idea of defeat, you know, of just like, man, I just can't ever win. Like I'm just not getting the word like I want to get into. So now you're like guilty because you're not in the word. You're guilty because you don't have this prayer life that you want to have, this idealistic thing. And I think it's frustrating because like on social media, we see all these different, you know, even faith-based influencers who are like, oh, just enjoy my quiet time in the back of a VW van overlooking Hawaii. You know, like, get out of here. No, you're not. You post this picture and you're done. You know, I'm just kidding, but I'm not.
Yeah,
but the idea of this is like how when we're guilty and we feel guilt, we haven't really dealt with it, or we have, but we're dealing with ourselves because we don't want to talk to ourselves or deal with ourselves. That breeds that defeat. And so that anytime that the Lord's trying to do something in our life too, to pull us out of this rut, you know, it's just like, man, I can't, you know, I want to, but I can't. So you're guilty for even the action or not, or the lack of action. And so it's destruction. The enemy's just breaking us down and putting on these quote, like, you know, like onion layers, you know, onto us, to where it's hard to hear. You know, if you've ever had like heard like a sound dampening room. It's kind of cool how like in studios when the producer's on the other side, he hears what's coming through his headphones, but like you don't have headphones, you can't hear anything because it's like a noise deadening room. But you go in the studio, like in the expert, and you can hear everything. It's just kind of what I feel like in life, how guilt and sin and things just kind of keep putting this barrier on us where it's harder and harder to hear God's voice because we're not taking intentionality to really get involved with the Lord and say, God, like you said, help me to do this. You know, don't make it on your own power. God, help! I need your help doing this because on my own, I'm nothing. You know, and when we start seeing those chips of hope, I think that's where we start finally feeling freedom of just like, oh man, I can breathe again. You know, the sky's blue, the sun is shining, the birds are singing. You know, that whole idea. As funny as that is, like I've been there though. You know, or that feels real. You know, so.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that hanging on to that guilt can be a selfish tendency, and you're just focused on yourself and where you're at. And like, we need to be others focused, and we need to be focused on Christ. And when you're just like sulking in the guilt, like feeling bad for yourself in that situation, like you're not like that is a selfish thing that you're doing, and you're not focused on others and what you should be focused on. So you need to like look outward.
Yeah. Selfishness too. I mean, that just pairs so well with pride, which adds guilt and everything else into it. Where it's like, wow, we kind of finish up with this. I mentioned last night too, where I was reading off the gotquestions.org. What one of the professors was writing on there was just like contributors was like how we're robbing God of the cross, robbing Christ of the cross by still holding on to a guilt that's been forgiven when we've identified sin. Now, I want to make clear that you're guilty, so it's not like, oh, you're free, this free card to do anything. You identify sin, seeking forgiveness and seeking a way out that through the Lord, and then viewing guilt as God sees it, forgiven. When we don't do that, then we're robbing Christ of the cross essentially of that. Just like, man, I understand you forgive me, I understand you're sovereign, but I feel like I need to prove to you that I'm doing this well before I can accept it myself. That's tough. That's a whole culture shift.
It is. Yeah. It is.
And I think that's why I was seeing some of the confusing looks last night. I'm just like, wow, like I had until I was really studying this of like dealing with that. We don't want to deal with ourselves. I'd rather deal with somebody else than deal with me. I don't know about you.
It's hard to deal with yourself.
It is very difficult. I'm a hard person to deal with anyway. So.
No comment.
Oh, man. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, like, back to the whole guilt thing. Like, if we sin, I feel like at times we run from God. You talk about Cain and Abel. When Cain killed Abel, and Cain's out there trying to hide. And God sees him.
Yeah.
Honestly, Cain's lying. I thought we do that so
Where's
much.
your brother? He says. What's funny is he asks the
life.
same thing in Adam and Eve. Like, where are you?
Yeah. Like, I'm hiding. Like, God can see us. God knows. Like, so I think, if anything, when we mess up, we need to run to Christ, not from Christ. So, that's my take.
Run to freedom.
Right.
Run to hope, for sure. A 1 Peter hope. It's I hope this happens. It's a no-so hope. Like I know it's going to happen, so I hope in it and trust in it. Anything for you? Closing comments?
Identify sin, seek forgiveness, and if you kill us, God sees it forgiven.
Amazing.
That's a really strong quote. Somebody should write that down. That's a good one.
You get framed.
Frame it. All right. Closing quote for me or anything is not really. You can't. I think. I don't know if Spurgeon said this or somebody else, but you can't out-sin God's grace. He's always, it's abounding. And it's just our finite minds. It's hard for us to put that into perspective, just how good God is and, what he can do in our life for us. He's fighting for us too. And just resting in that. Cool. College Ministry Roundtable. This is it. This is episode number 2. Yep. So talking about guilt, and we're excited about it. If you're listening to this currently, we have Love Taylor's coming up April 1st. Are you helping out with that? Are you going to be here?
Yeah.
Are you helping out with that?
I am helping.
Yeah, running a pretty sweet block party, among other things too. And then our reach trips are still open too, to go on reach trip this year. So excited about that. All right. This is Taylor's College Roundtable. Thanks for joining us. And we'll catch you Sunday. Hope to see you then. And everybody on spring break, have a good one. And those coming back. Man. Back to the grind.
Back to the
All right.
Yep.
Cool. We'll see you.